Welcome back to TechNet Radio. In today's episode, SharePoint Product Manager Bill Baer interviews SharePoint Certified Master Taj Singh about throttling limits and business connectivity services for SharePoint 2010. Listen in as they discuss how throttling limits in BCS vary from normal lists and query throttling, and how to configure and crawl large repositories using BCS within those throttling limits. Bill, the mic is yours.
Hello and welcome back to TechNet Radio. This is Bill Baer. I'm a product manager in the SharePoint product group, and this is episode number 4, Throttling Limits in Business Connectivity Services in SharePoint 2010. Our guest today is Taj, who is in our services sector and is also a Microsoft Certified Master for SharePoint. Taj, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Hey, morning, Bill. Hi, everyone. My name is Taj. And I work with services in Microsoft, and I'm a SharePoint MCM as well as a SharePoint Ranger inside Microsoft. And I have been doing some pretty extensive work with BCS, and today we are going to talk about one of the topics in BCS, which is how do you do throttle management in BCS.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. And just to kick it off then, let's go ahead and start with our first question that I have for you today. So really, when we think about throttling limits in BCS, how are they different from normal list and query throttling?
Very interesting question, Bill. So generally people, they have seen the new SharePoint 2010 and they know that there is a throttling limit on the list and large list. And the reason for doing that is just to avoid the overhead on the server as well as to limit the data transfer over the wire and everything. But most of people, when they start working on BCS, what they realize is that those settings are something which are not applicable to the external list, even though they have increased the limit for throttling. But still, my BCS external list, they just time out. And the reason for that is the BCS external list doesn't pick up the values from that specific setting we make in the web application settings. And why BCS throttling is different from the normal list throttling? So the reason for that is what normal list throttling tries to do is basically control your own server, the SharePoint server, and the resource usage on your server. But when you are using BCS, you are also connecting to some third-party system in your organization, and you're kind of putting some stress or load on that also. So when you're connecting to that, so there should be some kind of regulation as to how much data you can pull from there, and there should be some kind of throttling done at that end. So that's the reason the BCS throttling is different from the normal SharePoint list throttling.
Okay, so when we think about normal SharePoint list throttling, most of us are familiar with going to web application settings and then selecting resource throttlings and configuring our settings there. For BCS, how do we set that up?
Okay. So the BCS throttling is a little different, and there is no UI in central administration or any of the site collections to do it. So this setting is actually controlled by PowerShell, or you can write some object model code to actually change these settings. So there is no UI for doing that. But changing via PowerShell is pretty simple, and you can do it very easily using that.
Okay. So one of the other things, I guess, that comes up is suppose I have a pretty heavy search architecture, and I'm really looking to surface information about my line of business applications that sit outside of SharePoint. How can I crawl these large repositories that I may have by using BCS, but staying within the throttling limits?
Yeah. So this is an interesting question because generally when we are doing a list-based thing, we can kind of limit the number of users or the number of records which the users see. But in this case, the search, we actually have to go out and crawl all the content which is available in the external system. So the recommended way to do is there is a last ID